Welcome to another episode of Dr. Kamini Rao's Masterclass. Another week, another episode, and another new guest. Yes, you heard it right. We are now going to interview an exceptional educationist, who not only educates students but also educates teachers par excellence. He is none other than Dr. Gururaj Karjagi. He has an academy for creative teaching of teachers and has trained innumerable teachers in the proper way of teaching students, because that has now become an art, a protocol, and therefore when the quality of education improves, then the quality of the nation improves. And that, my dear friends, is something that is a forgotten art. And I think today, if you have good teachers, you have good students, then you have a good nation. So let's now interview Dr. Gururaj Karjagi. Welcome, Dr. Gururaj Karjagi. It's a pleasure meeting you today. I've heard so much about you. Education is in your blood, in your mind, in your dreams. It doesn't even make you sleep, and that is what I have heard. And I'm so happy to have you on this program. A lot of people are going to want to listen to you and to be able to learn from you.
I feel honored and privileged, ma'am, that I have been asked to come here and share whatever little I know with you. And as you said, education is my life. And not only life, it's the purpose of my life also. So therefore, when you look out for the purpose of your life and you get it, you feel so gratified. I am one such soul who is gratified by the field of education.
I just want to know a little bit of your background as a child. I mean, you came from a middle class family. Obviously, everyone placed a lot of value on education, and this is something which is not new in the era that you came in. But you did tell me that your sister influenced you a lot in terms of values in education. Can you tell me something about your sister? How did she actually influence you?
I'm really fortunate, ma'am. As it is said in the life of Krishna, he had two mothers. One who gave him life and then gave him purpose of life. My mother, my biological mother, gave me life and gave a lot of values to me. But my sister who shaped my life. If the age gap between the two siblings is small, they tend to fight with one another. The gap is more, there is less fight. My sister was older to me by 6.5 years. I respected her in every sense. She was the most intelligent person I have seen in my life. I have seen.
Why do you say that?
Amazing, ma'am. Academic performance, if you see, she got first rank from SSLC to MSc throughout her career. Never ever got second rank. And from first year degree to MSc final year, she got 100% results. Unbelievable. She had mathematics major minus statistics. If the question paper has 10 questions and she has to answer 6, she would answer all 10 and come back. You can choose anything you want.
So you are a chip of the old block then, huh?
I tried to emulate her, but I never got first rank in my life. And the highest was a second rank I got. But I had a consolation. Maths you get 100%. I used to pull my legs off my sister. Maths and statistics you can get 100% marks you can get. But in chemistry, physics they don't give you 100%. Why blame them? I did not get 100%.
But what was it that really influenced you about her? Was it only the education that influenced, or was it her outlook towards life?
She was one of the most pragmatic philosophers I have seen in my life, ma'am. Right from my childhood, she shaped me in everything I did. The way I talked to people, the way I respected people. Today I learn, as I always say, footfalls of values are always identified in the hindsight. We don't realize when things happen. 20 years later, we sit back and realize, oh my God, that was the turning point of my life. I had many instances of this kind with my sister. When anybody came to my house, she would say, Guru, go and do that. Help them, serve them. Initially, I cursed it. I didn't like it.
But why?
The reason is that, see, everybody is sitting quiet and only I have to do it. And is it a curse to be youngest fellow in the house? I had to go on doing everything. But then I learned it was a way of teaching how to respect people. Many people would come to our house, and those days we did not have cots. We had to spread the beds on the floor, put the nice bed sheet and all that. I had to do it, keeping water for them while sleeping. And sometimes the old people come and I had to press their legs. They are tired, and she would say, go and do it. And today it is natural to me. Respecting people at home and guests who come there is natural to me, because that's my sister ingrained in me, the art of serving people. And she said beautifully once, Guru, you realize yourself through the eyes of others. I can never forget this statement. You realize yourself through the eyes of others. When you look into the eyes of people, you can see admiration there, you see love there, you see affection there. You can also see jealousy, you can also see frustration there. The way people look at you can make out what are you actually. If you are seeing a lot of love in the eyes of people, you are earning love. If you feel jealousy in the eyes of people, you are harnessing jealousy there. Be careful.
So maybe she taught you how to earn people rather than earn money.
She never forced money, ma'am. She was never impressed about money. She said, money can be earned, but the love of people cannot be earned. You have to endear yourself to them, work hard for it, do something for them, otherwise you will not be successful.
There's another incident when she was actually offered a principal's post in the college, and her husband was still a lecturer, and she refused it because she felt that the family equations were more important than her career. Can you just elaborate, what did you mean by that?
She had an exceptional academic career, and she was a brilliant teacher, and I am a witness to it. She taught mathematics to me, which I did not like, and she taught me so well that I could teach even quantum mechanics at the MSc students so easily with mathematics, thanks to her. In addition to that, she had such balanced life. She was offered principal post at a very young age. She could have become the commissioner of Kendriya Vidyalaya. To that level she could have grown, but she refused principalship. We were all surprised. She is such a strong lady with strong determination. Why did she refuse? She didn't say anything to anybody. When I was traveling with her, I asked, Akka, why did you not take principalship? You could have taken, could have grown, become assistant commissioner and commissioner. She told me very simple, Guru, life is more important than job. That's all she said. It is for me to understand. She didn't want conflicts in the house. There may not be direct conflict, but ego will come. Wife is the principal and husband is not the principal. It can create problem. She was more focused on the family. She said, I am enjoying my teaching. I'll do that, but not at the cost of my family. This perfect balance in life taught me a lesson, ma'am. You may be obsessed with your job, but you also have a commitment to your family. You can't ignore it. She managed it beautifully. She brought up her two children so well with culture, knowledge, studies. Both are exceptional today in their life.
But I think, in a way, not many people will be able to understand that, and certainly not her husband. Does the husband know that she has sacrificed so much?
Very great man. Very great man. Very interesting thing, ma'am. There is a competition for nobility. That's interesting. She didn't want to tell him directly that I did not take because you are not the principal. He knew it very well and did not hurt her. And finally you would tell me, your Akka is a great lady, You tell me, your Akka is a great lady. She never told me that she did not accept, but I understood why she didn't take it. And that is a beautiful thing about life, ma'am. You value your wife and wife values you, and don't have to make it statements. You'll understand each other.
So there was more words in the silence rather than in the spoken language.
In fact, as Allama Prabhu says, there's more meaning in silence than in words. They were like that.
Excellent. Were your children able to imbibe these values like what you did from your sister?
Yes. In fact, thank God, my two children are wonderful today. They have grown so well. They have reached the height of their success now in life in terms of earning, in terms of position in life. Both are vice presidents of their own huge multinational companies. They are very young still and still balanced, very, very balanced.
You've also done very well. You were one of the youngest PhDs at the age, very young age. In 2 years you did your PhD. How did you manage that? Chemistry is quite a difficult subject, with all those equations, etc. Oh, it's tough. How did you manage it?
In fact, my professor told me, it takes about 5 to 6 years to do your PhD. I said, forget it, sir, I don't want PhD. He said, why? 5-6 years is so precious, you can't waste on a PhD degree. And what is the minimum, sir? I asked him. He said, minimum is 2 years. I said, I want to finish less than 2 years. He said, you can't do it. I told him, look, sir, when I come there, I have a very clear concept, ma'am. I am going to do my PhD. My focus is only PhD and nothing else. You will not believe I went to Dharwad to do it. I did not have any distraction. Focus on that. Work for 16 hours to 18 hours a day. Finish it, because I didn't want it to proceed for a long time. If 6 years of my life is taken by PhD, is not worth it. I said yes. I did the same amount of work that people do in 6 years, finished in 1.5 years, prepared the thesis, submitted and came back. It still remains a kind of a record. That is the fastest PhD. But I did not compromise on the quality, because I want to finish off somehow, not finishing off somehow. It has to be a good quality, good publications in international journals. And that way I was very much respected, because you have publications to your credit. In science, more than PhD, publications do matter.
Absolutely, absolutely. So I certainly look that we need to understand when you do something, if you have too many files opened in your brain, then you don't give that efficiency and effectiveness into what you do. So you decided to open only one file, and that is the PhD file, and then you close every other file. So during this entire process, where does marriage come in?
Fortunately, I didn't have to look for a girl for marriage, ma'am. She is my maternal uncle's daughter.
Oh, okay.
Uncle's daughter. And my father and mother had decided that I should marry her, and her parents also had decided, and had no objection. She is a wonderful girl, wonderful. As I should tell you casually, I am married for 41 years and we didn't fight even once. Something difficult to believe, but we lived like that. There was no need to fight. She understands me so well. I love her unconditionally. This unconditional love is more important. And to do that, there is no difficulty at all.
What did the boys say? They also said the same thing. My God, this is like a fairy tale marriage or something like that. No, but it is nice to understand, because see, once you know that you draw your boundaries, that this is where we get off and agree to disagree.
Ma'am, I should tell you one more thing, ma'am. It's not that we don't have differences. We are poles apart. I am academic, she is not academic.
What does she do?
She is housewife. She is a homemaker, I would call her.
That's a 24/7 job.
A very tough job, very tough job. I would not have done it. She did it all these 40 years and brought up my 2 sons so well. It's her credit. But thing is, our tastes are totally different. I want to read and write so much. She won't read much other than newspaper and the weekly magazines. And I love to talk to people. She doesn't want to talk to people. She remains in the house. She pushes me forward. Everything diametrically opposite.
But they say unlike poles attract.
That's why we are happy together. And once a women-lib person came to my house. Very interesting. My wife is very innocent. She won't talk to people like that. She went and asked her, "Ma'am, you are always the shadow of Dr. Karjagi. Dr. Karjagi is seen by people, known to people. You remain only in the shadow. Don't you feel bad? Should you not push yourself in some other area?" I was wondering what she will answer. She answered in a very simple way. I am extremely happy when he is successful. In fact, I told them also, if I am successful, a large majority of the success should go to her. She didn't demand from me what is expected of a normal householder. She allowed me to be what I am, allowed me to be there. I'll share a simple instance, ma'am, it will be useful. Yeah. Dr. C.N.R. Rao and Indumati Rao, his wife, we took them to a place called Lakshmeshwar in North Karnataka. One school girl asked her, "Ma'am, sir has become Bharat Ratna. What is your contribution in his becoming Bharat Ratna?" Srimati Indumati Rao answered so beautifully and naturally. She said, "I allowed him to be a Bharat Ratna." Allowed him to be a Bharat Ratna.
Absolutely. It's very, English is such a beautiful language, you can express it so well and in a simple sentence, and it's got so much of meaning. It's very good. In fact, I think, the society undermines a woman's role, and it is really like a pillar of support to the man, or even the other way around. The husband supports the woman and the woman also comes up. And I think in society, both man and women are equal. That is what I would just say.
In fact, as you said rightly, ma'am, it has been a male-dominated universe for a long time. And chauvinism is at its peak at that time. Now slowly things are opening up. We are realizing the importance of women. She should be given the prime place that she really deserves. And they have been taking it so long, remaining in the shadows and pushing men in the limelight. But today is the time. In fact, I became very unpopular, I should tell you. In 1978-79, I became very unpopular by writing an article that the 21st century belongs to women. And people are angry. You are trying to only satisfy people and make them popular by writing such articles. I said, no, I have documents to prove. The number of women that used to go to engineering colleges in 60s and 70s was very small. But slowly and slowly, you find large number of women going to engineering colleges, medical colleges. There was only one Kiran Bedi earlier. There are so many IPS officers today. There was only one IAS officer earlier. Today, so many IAS officers have come. These engineering people who go to college, institutions to work, they join at the lower level. After 20 years, where are they? They are in the policy making positions. And now imagine all of them, if you see engineering colleges today, ma'am, 60% and above are women in engineering colleges. Large number of girls are going to medical colleges. Where will they be in future? They will be the leaders of society. Therefore, I said 21st century does belong to women. It does belong to them. And it should happen. It should happen.
I think more than it should happen, I think that is evolution. I think there was a time when they were all worshipped as gods and goddesses and all, and then they were put down, and now they are resurging up. And I think that would be. Now, Akka was one person who really influenced you. Who were the other people that influenced you? You told me about Ajja as well. Why did he influence you?
My Ajja was great to me. He was an encyclopedia for me, radio, television, philosopher, everything rolled into one. At a very impressionable age of my life, my grandfather was the only person who stood by me all the time. I had a chance of watching all his actions. He came from absolute poverty, I should tell you, ma'am. He came from a place called Galgali in Bijapur district. He had nothing to eat, that kind of situation. His father, I would say, casual, irresponsible, leave the children and go away, travel elsewhere. And mother had tough job bringing up the 5 children. 5 sons and a daughter. Very difficult. They didn't have. But my grandfather never complained about it. Never complained about it. One thing I learned from my grandfather is, don't complain. Leaders don't complain. You would always say, leaders don't complain, and those who complain are not leaders. Okay, leaders have to solve problems. They can't complain about it. And then I saw this man becoming a teacher in a primary school in a village, and he was all rolled into one man. He was a postmaster. He would carry postcards, inlands and covers in his pocket, go from village to village. It was pre-independence time. Write letters, use post office. Villagers asked, if I write letter here, how would it reach there? He would write letter for them. And the letters did come back, he would go and read for them. And then starts telling them, this is the water for drinking, don't spoil it. Don't take your cattle for washing there. You'll put potassium permanganate, bleaching powder there, and take DDT and bleaching powder in his pocket. Tell them, don't defecate here, don't make this place bad here, you'll put DDT. And he would take all precautions, man. It was not his job. And he was a postmaster, he was a health inspector, he was a doctor, and also a priest also, all rolled into one. And I remember he is showing me, my grandmother used to show, Queen of England sent him such a big silver medallion as a mark of respect to what he has done. The deputy commissioner, a white man at that time, came and gave it to him. And my grandmother kept it on the platform in the house there. He came and said, why are you keeping that? Take it out. He took it out, put in a trunk and pushed it under the cot. My grandmother said, why are you putting that? You should be outside. He said, no. It creates an illusion that I have done something for society. I should not remember. I should do, but don't remember. That's a great quality I saw, madam. Today we see people doing 1 gram and publishing tons of it. But here is a person who was doing tons of it and never wanted to display. He told me one thing, never go on showing what you have. Do it. World will recognize. You don't have to do it. That one wonderful lesson my grandfather taught. And he was an extraordinary teacher. Wherever he went, the marketplace, anywhere, he would take me along with him. And people would come there and touch his feet and, sir, we are here today because of you, sir. Countless examples I can give, madam, like that. I was just about 4 years or 3.5 to 4 years. We would go to the market to purchase something. He would say, come with me. And I had to follow him. There's no question. He was a big, tall man. He would put a cap on my head because it was a very hot place. And then would walk. He would not hold my hand. Very peculiar. Normally, old people would hold the hand of the children. You will not hold. You will tell me, look, you should walk in my shadow. You should go wherever the shadow goes. And you would walk. And the sun comes on this side, the shadow would be here. Shadow would be here. I will go around and round him so that I can always remain in the shadow. Then after 3-4 years, I grew up. One day I told my grandfather, Grandpa, your shadow is not enough for me now. I am growing big and shadow is not enough for me. He told me, it was only a statement at that time. 20 years later, it became a philosophy of life for me. He told me, child, remember this. When you are very young, you should be in somebody's shadow. But when you grow up, don't look for shadows. Create your own shadows. I learned a lesson, man. As we are growing, we need support of somebody. I am in the umbrella of protection of somebody. But don't expect umbrella all the time. Think of a situation where you become an umbrella to somebody else.
Excellent.
That's a lovely message. My grandfather was full of pragmatic philosophy all through his life.
A lot of that must have rubbed on to you when you teach students and then you create a curriculum for teachers as well. So just moving into your realm rather than, from your childhood days. Now, why did you get into teaching? What made you get into teaching?
I should tell you an incident, madam. Something happened to me. I was in Dharwad, studying in a famous school called as K. Boards High School. It was supposed to be a rank-getter school. My sister was a role model to me. She was an outstanding performer. My father was a government servant. He would get transferred frequently, and being an honest officer, he was transferred more frequently. Then we had a small house in Dharwad, so we stayed there. I finished my 10th standard examination. By then my father was in Kolar, down south. We were up north in Dharwad. We used to go to parents only during vacations. My sister and myself went there. Father was very happy that the children have come. We arranged a 6-7 days tour to Tirupati and Gadhasti, all those places. We came back late at night and slept. And next morning my father got up and he was reading the newspapers of all the previous days when he was not in town. This is the disease with some men. Whenever they are not in town, they would read the newspaper of the previous days and wonder how the world progressed without they are not reading the newspaper. My father belonged to that category. Suddenly he shouted, "Hey, what is this number?" This fellow, I was sleeping. Results had come. Results had come, and those days the numbers of successful candidates would come in the newspaper. The numbers were small, like a lottery ticket. My sister said, she was more confident, and don't worry, I'll see. She went and saw the first page, 10 ranks were announced. First, second, third, my name was not there. She, idiot, missed the rank. She looked into first class, it was not there. With increased worry, she looked into second class, it was not there. With increased palpitations, she looked into third class, hoping that this fellow will pass at least, it was not there. I had failed in the SLC examination. Most unexpected result. Both my mother and sister started crying. And my father got angry, usual reactions. After half an hour, my father realized that I am the only son. Then he said I should not shout. Told my mother, don't shout. Where will I shout? You don't shout. There was an understanding between them. When I got up in the morning, parents were so good to me. Parents are normally good. When they become too good, you feel suspicious about it. Then my sister came and hugged me and started crying. You fellow, you have failed in examination. Which subject have you failed? I didn't know. The only person who could guide us was the headmaster of the school at that time. Remember, there was a black box called telephone earlier. Yes. We used to go on turning the number. Finger became screwed, but we never get the line. After 3 days of effort, my father said, we'll go to Dharwad. Both of us went to Dharwad. Please visualize, ma'am. I'm a failed candidate going to meet the headmaster of the school. I was feeling miserable. I was praying God that I should become transparent and nobody should see me. And my father was going ahead of me, suddenly turned back and said, staff room, as if I did not know. I studied there only. I stealthily looked into the staff room. I found my maths teacher sitting there. And unfortunately, he saw me. Hey, Karji, come here. He called me. I walked inside, put my head down like a lamb to be butchered. He scolded me in chaste words and said, idiot, good for nothing creature. I taught you mathematics for 1 full year. Can't you get 30 marks? Shame on you. Go and appear for September examination. Go, don't show your face to me. I felt miserable. I knew now which subject I had failed. Till then I didn't know also which subject I had failed. Then he called my father and blasted him also. Those days teachers used to shout at their parents also. Is it responsibility? When the results come, should you not be in town? This fellow has failed. He cannot fail. See, the consolidated marks card says the lowest marks he has got in social science, 92. He should get 100 in mathematics. I taught him. 13 marks he has got in mathematics. Something wrong has happened. And the department gives you only 5 days to apply for retotaling. Only 5 days. You have to fill up the application form and send 5 rupees. Please mark it, ma'am. He told my father, I went to your house on 3 consecutive days. House is locked. What nonsense is that? Then said, don't worry, I know that you are not in town. I came back to school. I myself took the application form for retotaling. I submitted it as the guardian of the child, and sent 5 rupees to SSLC board. Take care of this fellow. He should not commit suicide. Take care of him. We came back home, madam. I can't forget that day, 21st of May, blistering hot. I was sitting alone in my house. I could see the road in front of the house. The tar of the road melts. The road is burning like hot stove. I saw my teacher coming there on the road. Kache dhoti, white shirt, coat, cap and thick glasses. He was holding the edge of the dhoti in one hand, holding chappals in the other hand.
Oh my God.
Walking barefoot. He must have had blisters on his feet.
But why?
My teacher was a diabetic. He had hurt his toe. The toe had swollen so much he could not wear the chappals properly and walk fast. Since he wanted to walk fast, he said, forget about it. He came like that, sweating profusely. He turned towards my house, dropped the chappals outside the threshold and walked in. You can imagine what would happen to a child when he sees his favorite teacher coming like that alone. He came in, I just stood up. Time stopped, man.